So, good evening. I'd like to call the 2026 annual meeting of the Arlington Town School District to order. And a few housekeeping notes to begin with. If you wish to address the assembly, we have a microphone here in the center of the floor, and please come up and state your name. And after being recognized, you can ask your questions and make your comments. I'd like to introduce our school board, and we have here from your left to right, Nicole Whalen, Jessica Bakayaki. Sorry, my glasses are not quite working for me here. Then Terry Sweet, Dan Wood, and Todd Wilkins. And as we begin, our state representatives, Kathleen Janes and Rob Hunter, would like to address the assembly. As they're not Arlington residents, we would need a motion to allow them to do so. And who moved? And Mary Ann is the second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to allow our state representatives to speak to the assembly, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? And I'd like to turn it over for a few minutes.
Great. Thanks so much, and thank you for allowing us to speak. We are on tour tonight, so we go from Arlington to Sunderland to Sandgate, which is actually always a lot of fun. So Rob and I are going to try to keep it brief. I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare and housing, and then just a couple of bills that the committee I chair, House Energy and Digital Infrastructure, one that we've passed and one that we're working on. And then I'm going to do just a really quick high-level sort of how we got here with education reform, and then turn it over to Rob, who actually serves on the House Education Committee, to bring you up to speed about where we are right now with education reform up in the State House. So healthcare, I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room that the rising cost of healthcare is a huge problem for many Vermonters, especially with the loss of federal subsidies and the federal tax credit. Many Vermonters are struggling to pay the cost of their premiums, and early numbers showed that as many as 2,500 Vermonters may have dropped their plans this year, which means that they can't afford the cost. They are going without coverage, which is obviously a real struggle and a hardship for families, and then unfortunately drives up the premiums for the rest of us who remain in the pool. So a lot of healthcare policy is unfortunately sort of beyond the control of the state legislature, but we do everything we can. And last year was the first year that I felt that we had really notched some big wins on healthcare. We passed a bill, S-126, that is going to move Vermont by 2027 to a new system called reference-based pricing. And this is really kind of a game-changing cost containment study. And it pegs the price for every healthcare service to Medicare rates. And that's going to give the Green Mountain Care Board a lot more control over hospital budgets and the cost of healthcare premiums. So, like I said, it's the first time in a while when I felt like we were able to pass something big. And we should start to see that help us over time. We also passed a bill, S-266, that tackled the high cost of hospital-administered outpatient drugs. And the best way for me to describe that is if you think about if you're having cancer treatments and you go in for your chemo, it's outpatient, but that is a very, very expensive drug. And we put a cap on what hospitals could charge for those, and that's starting to bring the costs of healthcare down. And then the Green Mountain Care Board, that's not controlled by the legislature, but they're doing a really good job of scrutinizing healthcare insurance rates, premium requests, and also hospital budgets. And so just in the past year, we've been able to pull $230 million in costs out of our healthcare system. So I feel like we're making a little bit of progress. And we also have kind of a neat bill going this year. It was introduced with the support of Treasurer Mike Pichek, and he's working with other states around the region to increase our bargaining power and negotiate lower prescription drug prices. So I think that this bill is going to pass. You can keep an eye out for it. It's called H577. Anybody with a Vermont address is going to be able to use the new Array RX. That's what it's going to be called. Array RX Multi-State Drug Discount Plan. It's going to be available to no cost to the consumer, so you can just get that card and enroll in that plan. And it could bring the cost of generic drugs down by 80%. It's always nice to have some good news. Housing, I also don't need to remind anybody in this room about the housing shortage and the negative impact that it has on families, on our economy, on our schools, our communities. I think the biggest news there, and folks in this room may already be familiar with this, but last year we passed a big bill to stand up a new program called CHIP. And I forgot to write down what that stands for. Community Housing Infrastructure Program. CHIP. And what CHIP is I think a lot of folks have heard of tax increment financing. So, you know, big districts where that spur kind of housing and economic development in approved districts across Vermont. These tend to be big districts in some of our bigger towns and cities. CHIP uses tax increment financing on a small scale, on a project basis. And it's going to help developers and municipalities leverage kind of favorable financing for infrastructure that's related to housing, so think water, sewer, and sidewalks. So CHIP is up and running. It is taking applications right now. Towns and cities are already starting to apply. And then we'll see if it gets across the finish line this year. We do have a bill moving that's going to try to kind of rebalance landlord-tenant law. I hear so many complaints all the time about landlord-tenant law. You hear from tenants who think it's unfair, landlords who think it's unfair, and we're trying to get a bill across the finish line that strikes a balance there. We'll see. And then we passed a bill that is hopefully going to make it easier for communities and citizens to get involved in cell tower siting. People want cell towers, they want coverage. Everybody wants to be able to get a signal at their home or business, but right now it's very difficult for people to get involved in where those towers are placed, so we're trying to make a difference there. I want to turn it over to Rob, but I just want to do a high-level reminder of kind of how we got here with education reform. I think that's top of mind for everybody. It's certainly been top of mind at all of our coffee hours that we've been having. Property taxes are increasing at an unaffordable and unsustainable rate for Vermonters. Education spending is rising every year, and folks can't afford their property tax bills. And property tax revenues make up about 67% of our total education funds. So the money that we all pay for our property tax bill is a huge part of education spending across the state. So, you know, we have all heard loud and clear from Vermonters that we need to do something about property taxes and that we need to really get a handle on education spending. So that brought us to last year. And I think that, you know, folks arrived in Montpelier with a big fire in their bellies to reform education. I'm going to try not to be too opinionated. So I won't say it went off the rails, but the conversation started with a bonfire about property taxes. And so the focus very quickly became how we pay for our schools and how we govern our schools. And people now are saying, well, what about student outcomes? What about the quality of education? What about small rural schools? And I would just remind folks in a way that I'm not too happy about, that wasn't the genesis of the work that we were sent to do. So last year, the legislature passed a controversial education bill, Act 73. The goal of Act 73 was to set up a multi-year, multi-step process to consolidate Vermont's 119 districts into much larger governance structures. The governor came out of the gate proposing that we go from 119 to 5. What we wound up with was passing a bill that would set up a task force that would work over the summer to come back with 3 proposed maps. Okay, so maps of bigger districts. We're going to give you guys 3 alternatives, and when the legislature comes back in January, we want you to pick one of those maps and move forward. That's not what happened. In a major plot twist, the task force took tons of testimony. They talked to 5,000 Vermonters. They looked at all the data, and they said, we don't think larger districts are going to save money, and we don't think it's the way to go. So to say that that was a plot twist is a bit of an understatement. So we started out this session with no maps and a task force saying, we don't think that forced mergers, we don't think consolidation, we don't think closing small schools by force is what we should be doing at all. I will give you one little hint. I supported the work of the task force, and I did vote no on Act 73, so now I've laid my cards on the table. But the governor has threatened to veto the state budget or any education bill that does not include much larger districts, maps, and a forced merger approach. So on that fun note, I think I'll turn it over to Rob. Rob serves on the House Education Committee, and he's really got a front row seat to kind of where we're at now. So he can tell you what we've been doing this year. And I want to just tell you that Rob has been working very hard for our communities. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Kath. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, School Board. And thank you all really for your continued, interest and your enthusiasm in your school here, and your support of teachers, and everything that happens in these buildings. It's really important, and I will add one detail that Kath left out, that in the last 30 years, we've lost 40,000 students in Vermont. And in fact, Don, I thought your essay, your article was excellent about Arlington and how times have changed over the last 3 decades. And herein also is part of the problem. We have this shrinking demographic of students, and really, by anybody's projection, it doesn't look like that's going to turn around anytime soon. So clearly, there is this need to right-size Vermont's education system. In fact, I kind of balk a little bit at the word transformation. I think that we need to make an adjustment. And those of you who read the newspaper and just kind of poke your head out of the sand every once in a while realize that many states go through this. And so it's not unique. It's not a unique problem to Vermont. The governor is, as Kathleen said, putting a lot of pressure on us to come up with a map. And my committee chair has proposed a map that is completely made up of supervisory districts, no supervisory unions. This does not work for our region. This does not work for many regions in Vermont, whether we're talking about the Grand Isle region, whether we're talking about the Northeast Kingdom. So what we have really is a deadlock in the Education Committee right now. Half of the committee is not willing to go along with such a proposal or the language that he has attached to it, that we would go from a state with many areas with non-operating districts where people tuition their kids to different schools because they don't have schools. So there's not much good with my chair's proposal at this point, and I vehemently oppose it. There has been an awful lot of pressure for me to get on board, but I'm not going to. I think that our region is much better served with the way that we've been doing things. I mean, that's pretty much in a nutshell. I wish I had some good news for you all. but I'm going to keep trying. Right. So, oh, right. Thank you. I'm getting so depressed talking. Seth Bongartz is working on such a map of new districts, much larger districts, larger SUs, and really that would be my goal too, is to really endorse a map that is a hybrid model with new larger districts, but larger supervisory districts where that works out, and supervisory unions where those areas rely on those kinds of deliveries for education. Crossover is when all of our bills in the House have to go to the Senate, and that is March 13th. And I have a pretty good feeling that nothing is going to come out of our committee by March 13th. I would expect that we will get some sort of an extension, and again, I don't see what we do as being pivotal. I see what's coming out of the Senate, you know, as a good sign. So there you have it. Yes, sir.
Peter Holdick-Smith, I live in West Arlington. Thanks for coming, Rob.
Sure.
It was mentioned that this idea of putting these mega districts together isn't going to save any money. How much money are we looking for, and where is the money that's being spent that is maybe not properly spent? I mean, you got to look at the numbers, right? Not just say I'm going to
right.
consolidate.
And herein is the rub as well. You know that you know is we went through Act 46, and there really is not much research to say, oh, look how much we spent. You know, look how much we saved. And so, you know, in the governor's words, it's we need to bend the cost curve. We need to somehow get spending under control. Now, one thing that the task force did come up with was this idea of shared service areas. That is, if you have larger districts with, you know, shared services, you know, an agency that really is getting special ed folks to do whatever tests they need to be doing on students, you know, that sort of thing, transportation, et cetera, that is in fact a cost saver, that sort of thing. But really, you know, the hard thing is when you're consolidating schools, people lose jobs. I mean, we're not just closing buildings and no longer putting on the heat, right? I mean, it comes down to people losing jobs. And maybe that's what the governor thinks is cost savings. I'm not sure. Yeah, this isn't, we just, right? I mean, you know, and there are certain cost drivers that we don't have any control over. In fact, you know, if in fact a bill gets passed about capping education spending at 3% or whatever they want to do for the next bunch of years, what if healthcare premiums go up 10%? What if the cost of special ed goes up this percent? And so there's no pretty way to do this, really.
Don Keelan, in 3 years from now, will this building, this high school, our middle school, will it still be in existence? Whether it's the House bill or the Senate bill or any bill, and are you and Kathleen and Seth fighting for us down here to keep our high school open?
That's a good question, Don. And I would say that's an absolute yes on that. You know, and I wish I could look in the crystal ball and know in 3 years what's on the horizon. I think that smaller schools have a much better chance of survival in a supervisory union than they do in a large supervisory district, where a larger supervisory district board is going to say, well, you know, we've only have so many kids at this school, let's put them over here, right, and make this into a mall. I don't know, right? So, yeah, Don, that's a great question, and I wish I could tell you in all honesty. This has all been pretty agonizing.
Hi, I'm Wendy Bucari, and I live here in Arlington. But have you ever thought of going back to where all the problem began and just repeal Act 60 and allow the towns to take care of their own budgets and their own education system? It's worked very well in the past. We had better outcomes. Towns made agreements with each other if they needed to. Yep. And I just feel like the more state, it was a whole taking the state take control where the town used to have it. And I feel like that's where the fork in the road. One was going to Maine and the other's going to Kansas. And we found out we wanted to be in Maine, but we're on the road to Kansas. So
Right.
I think we should come right back and repeal it.
It feels like that was a much more simple way to do things. But remember that Act 60 was the result of a Supreme Court decision in which they decided that the way that we funded education in Vermont was unconstitutional. And that's why we can't go back. Yeah, and that was the U.S. Supreme Court. So that was a biggie. Yeah. You want to let me go?
Coffee hours. I know that I wish we could stay. Actually, really love taking questions from the floor, but we were supposed to be in Sunderland at 7. So our next coffee hour is March 14th at the Arlington Common, and we've got a town meeting report over there with a QR code, which is a first. I'm very proud of that. So you can look on my website, the town meeting report, and our coffee hour dates. All of our dates through the end of the year are listed there. And like I said, we'll be we'll be at the Common on March 14th, and we can talk for as long as folks want to about education reform. Our coffee hours are always from 9 to 10:30, and we rotate from Charlie's to the Common to Wayside through June. Yep. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. So before beginning with the warned order of business, if we would all stand, and where the flag's over here. So we'll begin with the warned order of business, which is available online, and here's a handout this evening. And the first order of business is to elect a moderator and a recording clerk for the meeting. So I'd entertain a motion to nominate myself, John L. Whalen II, as meeting moderator, and Susan Poston as recording clerk. Sorry. We have to note who is there, so please keep your hand raised until we get names. Thank you. Thank you. Mary Ann? Is there any discussion on the motion before the assembly? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Then the motion carries. The next warned order of business is set forth in Article 2, to receive the report of the district officers for the preceding year. This report was found in the online, and copies are available this evening. And is there a motion to accept the written reports of the officers as presented in the annual report? So is there any discussion on the motion or on the reports? If there's no discussion, all those in favor of accepting the annual reports as presented, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion and article carried. Next is Article 3, to fix compensation to be paid to the officers of the district for the year beginning July 1st, 2026. And the proposed salaries are the chair of the board, $2,500, each board member, $1,500, or $6,000 total. The treasurer salary of $13,522, the clerk's salary of $500, and the moderator's salary of $200, for a total of $22,722. So is there a motion to fix the compensation as reported in the annual report? And a second. Any discussion on the motion? There's no discussion. All those in favor of fixing the compensation as stated, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The article carries. Article 4th, to authorize the school board acting on behalf of the district to borrow such sums of money in anticipation of taxes as may be necessary to properly finance the affairs of the school district. Is there a motion to authorize the school board to implement Article 4 as set forth? And Don seconds. Is there any discussion on the article? There's no discussion. All those in favor of authorizing the school board acting on behalf of the district to borrow such sums of money in anticipation of taxes as may be necessary to properly finance the affairs of the school districts, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The article carries. The next order of business at Article 5th, to have presented by the school board its estimates of the expenses of the school district for the ensuing year. This is a public informational hearing regarding the budget and related items, including Articles A and B to be voted on tomorrow and listed in the warrant order of business. At this point, I'll turn over the podium to Todd as chairman of the board.
I don't really like to stand in one spot, so that's why I'm going to use this microphone. First of all, thank you all for coming. Like we do every year, I want to present to you an overview of our budget, as well as the estimated tax rate, and we'll talk about that as we get to it. So this year's budget reflects a 2.48% increase, or $242,000 increase. The two biggest drivers of that this year are SU assessment, which is up $142,000. The vast majority of that is special education cost. Per the state of Vermont, all special education transportation is in your SU budget, and then we pay through an assessment. Then on top of that, we have tuition rates are up about $45,000. Almost the majority of this, if not all of it, is for our tech education. Tech education is up significantly over the last couple of years, but we must be able to provide our kids with that type of education. So our Southwest tech tuition rates are up about $45,000. So the highlights in this budget, you're going to see the assessment increase, which I just spoke about, the increase in our tuition. Our revenues are down, and the biggest driver of that is we had less surplus funds to put into the budget this year than we did the previous year. Health insurance costs, which are set by the state, they increase every year. I have a slide here just to show you the impact that that's had on school budgets over the last 8 years. We've had to cut several positions just to get us down to the $242,000 increase. Approximately 5 total positions throughout the district, none of them our direct education positions, but we had to cut them to get that budget down. The important piece here is in this current budget, all of our educational programs remain intact. There's nothing that's being cut out of that. What's affecting our budgets over the years? You can see that the school boards try to do their part to keep it down. However, the things that are outside of our control is healthcare costs. You can see since 2018, one family plan premium is up $26,000 per employee. So let's say half of our employees take a family plan. That's about a $1.3 million increase over that 8-year period. Okay, we have zero control over this. The state has taken this over. The state does all the negotiations for this. The other piece of that, the higher needs for our students. Mental health supports is just one example of that. We now have 2 full-time social workers, one in each building, to help prepare our kids mentally so that they can attend and learn every day. As I look around this room, I don't know if any of us had that in our schools when we grew up. I had a guidance counselor. I assume that's what most of you had as well. We now have 2 full-time mental health or social workers, as well as part-time with a collaboration through HCRS. Or I'm sorry, UCS here. I work in another county where it's HCRS. So. Key factors for our tax rate. The first one is our overall budget, which I just presented to you. You all get to vote on that. The next is our offsetting revenues, which are down a little bit this year. We subtract our offsetting revenues from our total budget to get what we need, and I'll explain this a little bit further when we get to a different slide, to get what we need to raise by taxes. From there, we get an average daily membership, long LTWADM is what you're gonna see it in our slides. And that is calculated and given to us by the state. That is, every pupil has a weight, as they call it. And if you have a child that is living in poverty, they get a bigger weight. Okay, if you have an English language learner, they get a different weight, which means the state reimburses you at a different rate for those students. This year, the poverty rate changed, so we have less students living in under the poverty rate, which then changes our LTWADM, long-term average daily membership. Yes, sir. Sure. I'm really informal. No, it is not mandated by the state.
What are the metrics that we're going to be using, and do you plan to report back to the community as to, A, what the signs or symptoms were that necessitated this, and secondly, how we're measuring the success of spending this extra money, and whether or not there's actually any tangible outcome towards the goal?
Yeah, I think it'd be very difficult to give you a tangible outcome other than what we see in our student behavior and how they're performing in school. That is very difficult for us to report out. We saw, right after COVID, we saw a very significant increase in trauma and mental health problems. So as a school board, we worked to bring in those professionals, initially funded by grants from the federal government. We saw a value in that, and it was preparing our kids to go to class every day. Whether we like it or not, our kids are faced with trauma at home every day. We can sit here and discuss whether or not they have the appropriate coping mechanisms or not, but that would be a long discussion. We unfortunately found the need to bring these individuals in to help prepare our kids to sit down in class every single day and learn. So to provide you with a tangible, return on investment type of presentation, I think would be very difficult to do. We rely on our school professionals to tell us whether or not it's actually helping, and we have seen value in that. I'll be honest, we had discussions on whether or not we were going to cut those positions this year, or one of those positions this year. It was a lengthy discussion. And we opted to leave it in there because of the value for this year. Yep. Okay. So back to this. The average daily membership is, and then, which is set by the state, then the property yield, which is also set by the state, and then we have our common level appraisals, which we're going to get into that a little bit as well, and I'll try to explain that a little bit more and show you how that affects your tax rate significantly. Yes?
Hi, Elizabeth Rossi. So just to kind of tie back into sort of what we make decisions about in terms of our positions here on the ground, it sounds like the social work is sort of that category versus what is being influenced by the SVSU. I think to the degree to which you could kind of help us understand that as you go through the budget, that would be great. When I hear discussions around special education, and I know the SVSU, that's a big role that they play, and I know it's a big number in our budget and just, adequate, hopefully. But I do wonder, is that based on the services that the kids actually are using? Is it that the SVSU says, oh, we need 49 special education teachers, and we're going to allocate 4 to Arlington based on their overall enrollment? I think that gets a little confusing.
Yep.
So
if you want to talk about assessments from the SVSU, what is included in that is administrative costs for your superintendent, their staffing down there that handles our human resources, payroll, business office, all that kind of stuff. On top of that, you have all your special education costs. All your teachers, your paraeducators are included in that. On top of that, you have your transportation costs. Most of your transportation costs. Your to and from school, basically. Any sports and things like that is on us as a district to pay for directly. Okay, so that's what's included in your SVSU budget. SVSU doesn't necessarily have 100% influence over our special education. Okay, they have programs that our students can access that are included in that, but the vast majority of what we pay for in our special education assessment are for boots on the ground here in Arlington. Special education teachers, paraeducators, we do have other, we pay a portion of some programs out there that we can access if there's space. Not always space, but we try to get those accesses for services for those kids. So hopefully that helps, and I'll try to answer that a little bit more as we go along too. So we talked about CLAs, and I've presented this before in the past about how CLAs dramatically affect tax rates, and we're in that similar boat still. The only way to change this is a townwide reappraisal. Everybody says, oh no, not a townwide reappraisal, my taxes are gonna go up. That is not necessarily the case. Okay, taxes don't go up just because you do a townwide reappraisal. Your grand list goes up, it changes your tax rate. Your taxes could either stay the same or potentially go down. Wouldn't that be nice? So this is a 10-year comparison, and you will see how Arlington's tax, or CLAs, have changed over the years. Okay? So as of 2023, we were at 100% almost. That is ideal. That's where you want to be. Okay, you can see that when you get a tax rate, it is 140, 140 in your calculations. You will see this year, tax rate before your CLAs were calculated was an estimated $1.70. We have a CLA in Arlington of 62.12%. Now the state has given us an adjustment this year, which I'll show you, which has helped it, but that's what drives your estimated tax rate for this year to be $1.93. And I say estimated because the governor has already said he wants to put $100 million into the ed fund. When the governor, if that passes, which I highly believe it's going to, That will change your tax yield, and your tax rate will drop significantly. It happens every single year. I've stood up here, I don't know, 15 times and presented tax rates. And every year I present a tax rate, it is never the tax rate that you get on your tax bill. In 2025, I presented $1.67. Your tax rate was actually $1.56. Okay, we can only use the information that we have at the time. Once money gets put into the ed fund and they have the true numbers that everybody votes on, it typically goes down. That number is shocking. I get it. Not what I want to present to you. The only way we could get that number down to that number is about a $2 million cut out of your school, which means we would butcher our schools because over 70%, nearly 75% of our budget is salary and benefits. Okay, so by cutting all those people to get to 2 million, we would have to cut a lot of teachers. So this is what you see in your book, and this is how your tax rates are calculated. Here's our proposed budget. We subtract our revenues, these are estimated revenues, and we get to this amount of money, $9,061,212, that we must raise by taxes. We take our long-term weighted average daily membership here, which is 598.97. You can see that's about a 37 ADM drop. It's not because we lost 37 students, it's because they changed the poverty rate, and we have less students that are in the poverty rate, which reduces their weight. Yep. They couldn't tell us what the poverty rate was, and they said because the federal government raised what income qualifies as poverty level. That was their answer. Okay, so for example, last year, if you made less than $40,000 a year, you were considered poverty. Well, they changed it to $45,000 this year, and I'm just using those for numbers. Okay, so now we have less families that are considered poverty level families. I'm sorry, yeah. The other way, yeah. Okay? Correct. So that brings us to our cost per long-term weighted average daily member to $15,127.99. The current property yield is $8,849 set by the tax commissioner. Okay, like I said, if $100 million goes into that, that number goes up, which brings your rate down. You then divide that and you get a tax rate of $1.70. If we had 100% CLAs, that would be your tax rate. But we're at 62.12%. The state has given us a kind adjustment, bringing us to an artificial 88.33. I say artificial because it's just a mathematical equation. It's not what your CLAs are. Your CLAs are 62.12%. To put that simple, that means your house is appraised through the town at 62.12% of its actual fair market value. That's the simplest way to put that. When we divide that number, we come up with a new estimated tax rate of $1.93. Again, estimated. Future challenges. You've already heard a little bit about Act 73. It's given us no answers. Nothing. I wish it had, because it would give us a direction. One thing that they didn't talk about tonight was a foundation formula, which has been batted around. And the simplest way to explain a foundation formula is the state would give you a certain amount of money per pupil. Last year, it was like $15,300 per pupil, okay? And it would only go up what the legislature says every year based on inflation. We're okay with that. Because then we can predict from you, every time we stand up here, or I stand up here, or whatever board member stands up here, we can say your tax rate is going to be X, and that's what it's going to be. There's no guessing, there's no estimating. It also gives us a finite amount of money that we have to operate within. Okay, and we're going to run our schools on that, and that's what you stick with. But that has not passed, or it wasn't even discussed up here tonight. Okay? Determining what's best for our education of our students and the future of our schools. Mr. Keelan asked if Arlington School District, or Arlington High School and Middle School would be here in 3 years. I'm not sure if that was an absolute yes or an I don't know. I'm going to tell you it's a big I don't know. It's a huge I don't know. Because we can't sustain tax rates going up at that rate, no matter what this board does. Okay, we can't cut your budget by $2 million and have a quality education for your kids to keep your tax rate down. We can't. The state either has to give the power to the local school boards, or they have to set something that is a sustainable way of calculating taxes and tax rates. Yep.
I don't even need that. Okay, sorry, thank you. I'm wondering, are supervisory union assessments negotiable?
No.
No part of it is negotiable. Like, we could never go back and say, we're not using this, can you reimburse us on this, or...
Yeah. So, okay, our assessment this year ended up being like 1.7 million roughly.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's based on our current need. Now, let's say we have 2 special education kids that are very high needs, and they cost us $150,000 to educate every year. Well, they move out of district. We no longer need to spend $150,000 for those kids. We will see a surplus in our assessment for next year.
Okay.
So if next year's estimated assessment was 1.7 million, it would be $150,000 less than that.
I think I'm less concerned about the special education costs, because I think they're attached to the kid and we need them, right? We need them to serve students.
Yep.
I'm more focused on sort of the administrative overhead. And that, I mean, I'm fairly new to Vermont. We came here in 2018, but sort of, so from where I come from, a school, K-12 school of this size, district of this size, usually doesn't need a superintendent. Usually doesn't need a lot of overhead. I wonder about the transportation being provided from, where it's coming from. Is it more costly to come from there just to go around town? So I'm wondering if those things are negotiable in any way.
So they're not. And I don't know how long you've lived here, but we were forced to ask VSU by the state five years ago. And last time I presented this, I actually presented our assessments over a 10-year period, and they've stayed pretty consistent. Okay, there was no big savings for us going to a bigger SU. There was none. We had our own part-time superintendent, he was also part-time special ed director. Like, we had combined multiple positions into one individual. Okay, Arlington has its own transportation. We're the only district in the entire supervisory union that does. Okay, we've had our operations director do the math both ways. Is it cheaper for us to go to Do4 or keep our own? It was essentially a wash, and we really like having our bus drivers. They know our kids, they know our routes. They don't tell us no if we need to go to Rivendell for a sport, things like that, whereas Do4 would. So those things are not really negotiable. We can push back on certain things, but Renee's done a pretty good job of keeping our assessment in line where we should be. There's not a lot of waste or fluff, and our portion of the administration costs are pretty good. You basically pay on pupils how your assessment's calculated. Yeah. Yep. So it's not negotiable. We have 3 voting members on the SVSU board, and as we review that and present it, it's pretty fair. And we've pushed back in the past several times, asking for those assessments to be brought down, recalculated, things like that.
So you're saying you feel like we are getting value for our money?
Yeah, I mean, as much value as you can. The unfortunate piece is, you know, you have 100 employees, so you need an HR director, right? Because I'm not dealing with 100 employees. I don't have the expertise to do that. You know, there's contracts and things like that that they deal with. Payroll, business manager. Those are things you have to have when you operate a district. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And, you know, I think at one point, the SVSU went to just one superintendent with no assistant for a little while. That was, I think, very detrimental. One man, one person cannot run, you know, a 600 employee, 3,300 student district or ESU. They just can't. So, yeah.
Talking about shared services being one of the conversations that could be a cost savings. With the BRSU to our north and the SVSU, some of those shared services could be special education. So instead of Arlington having a full staff that's, I think our staff is fully utilized, but there are ways that you can share services across supervisory unions that are adjacent to each other, whether that's transportation or a food service or special education. So those are some of the things where there are probably opportunities for decreasing overall costs by gaining efficiencies. And within the Senate map model, that is something that would be explored.
Just one other thing too, by cutting administration costs and staff, a lot of times that ends up cutting corners where they shouldn't be cut and results in potential things happening that result in the town getting sued, the school board getting sued, things like that, which ends up being a huge bill for everybody to pay. So, I mean, it's great to cut to the bone, but you don't want to cut any further than that.
And also in our administrative cost is our supervisory union attorney who does a lot of work for us, you know, things like that as well. I did just want to hit my last point, and then I'll take any more questions. The stabilization, you know, of the tax rates for our community. That's the piece I already talked about. We need help from our state legislature and Senate with this piece. Okay, we just showed you a $242,000 increase in your budget, but the estimated tax rate's a 30-cent increase. That isn't because we can control that. I get a little bit upset when I hear local school boards have to control that. I've just shown you the calculations where local school boards have one small piece of this. The rest of your tax rate is from the state of Vermont. So, any additional questions? Yes, sir.
More of a statement than a question. Thank you for the breakdown of the little control that the school board has and the, you know, all the knobs that the state turns on us that results in that, as Kathleen James said, unaffordable and unsustainable situation we are with education funding. Joe Jervis, for those that don't know me. In addition to all the statewide property tax, education devours all of our state sales tax, 1/3 of vehicle revenue and use tax, 1/4 of the 9% rooms and meal tax, all of the state lottery money, our new 3% surcharge on short-term rentals, the cloud tax and internet-based services, the new $100 million payroll tax that also increased our school budget so we can pay for pre-K, Medicaid funds, and for the past few years, any extra general fund surplus that the governor can scrape by to try and make that $100 million number that Todd was talking about to buy us down. This has to stop. And as citizens, we've got two knobs. We can vote no tomorrow, not to say the school board isn't doing their job, they're doing their job, but to say this is unsustainable and we can't afford a nearly 20% increase in our state property taxes. And secondly, November, get out of your house and go vote for legislators that are pay attention to fiscal conservatism. This isn't sustainable. And, you know, Act 73, they're trying to do something here, but it's a plan that's going to be 3 years, 4 years before we see anything. And as the representative said, student outcomes wasn't even on the list when they started it. It's got to be a balance between student outcomes and the cost. Thank you.
Other questions?
Has a health insurance like negotiation. Do you, and it's okay if you don't, have any idea when does that renegotiation happen, and how is that process for the state of education in Vermont? Like who do they go to say, hey, we need to have a healthcare insurance plan for all of these schools? What are your rates? What do you got? Like, how does that shopping happen?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to give you my best guess here. I believe that they go out to bid for that every 3 years, and teachers are lumped in with all state employees when they go to negotiation. So you're buying so much. You know, there's 8,000 state employees. I couldn't even tell you how many teachers there are in the state. However, there is, in every contract, there is a annual rate conversation, negotiation, I don't really know, that based on expenses, they can increase premiums. And we've seen, as I've shown you, astronomical premium increases, and we can sit here and have conversations about why and where and how, but I think that gets too deep into political stuff. We can't change that. We can't fix that. We have zero input in any of that. We are given a number every single year. Here you go. Good luck. You know, figure it out. And this year was a 7% increase in premiums, which was actually, you know, palatable compared to the last few, because we were looking at 17% one year, 12% the year after that. That was eating up a big chunk of our budget increases. So, yep.
While I'll be working, I have a question. There seems to be a conflict. Mr. Gervais seems to be advocating for a no vote. Yet I hear the board talking about costs that are fixed. So if the public were to vote no, what effect would that have on our costs?
I mean, if the budget's voted down, we have no choice but to go back and make further cuts. Like, we have no choice. We're going to have to work with our administrators and determine where it's going to come in staff. You know, like I said, over 70% of our budget is salaries and benefits. So the only way you make up money in a budget like this is by cutting staff. That is teachers, paraeducators, things like that. I would, you know, we had conversations about a pre-K program being cut completely, foreign languages. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's the reality of it. We would have to. And I'm not saying that to, like, I don't want anybody to be alarmed or, you know, anything like that or sway your vote. But that's the reality of where we would be. In order to cut anything significant to reduce that rate, it would have to come in those areas.
Hi, I hate these things, I'm sorry. Jessica Massey. Question about, you know, since we joined SVSU and prior to that, I wonder, and we're talking about administration costs, right? I wonder about the turnover of like support personnel, paraprofessionals, and that sort of thing. I mean, anecdotally, right? The turnover in the Bennington schools seems to be higher, maybe. Again, totally anecdotally, I don't have the numbers, but maybe you do. And I wonder, because the cost of hiring someone to work in a school, right? Background checks and all these other extra sort of things, because it's not McDonald's, right? Like, what kind of burden does that, and is there any space, is it worth the squeeze, right, to kind of sort out whether there's some kind of retention incentives or what else we could be doing to kind of reduce that overhead?
We don't see a humongous turnover in Arlington School District. So because we were blended into SVSU, although special education teachers and paraeducators are under an SVSU contract, they're paid at an Arlington School District rate. So they had a contract prior to us being forced down there, so we can't change their contract. Their contract says SVSU on it, but it is an Arlington School District rate. They're in our buildings. They can't be removed out of our buildings. So we don't have a huge turnover in that. We had to cut 3 paraprofessional positions out of our general education paraprofessionals this year to get this number down already. Doesn't mean that those individuals have necessarily lost their job. We had 3 other openings that they've transitioned into for special education type of a thing. So not a lot, if any.
Michael Briggs. I'm just curious, concerning earlier in your slides, Southwest Tech, you said there was a slight bump in cost. Was that an increase in the number of participating students, or was it the cost of the program?
Both.
Both,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We need more tradespeople. So.
Yeah, so you know, it's a fixed cost that we can't control because they have a tuition, right? They have to run their own facilities and things like that, so they set their tuition rate to us every year. We pay approximately, I don't have the exact number, but it's approximately $30,000 for what they call an FTE, a full-time equivalent, okay? None of our kids go full-time there, but how they work it out is we pay $30,000 for every full-time equivalent student that goes there. So we send approximately 23-ish students there part-time for tech education, and it costs us about $250,000 to send them there. Can't deny it, can't change it. You know, you all get to vote on their budget, but you know, their tuition cost is what it is. It's expensive. It's very expensive, but it's a program we have to give our kids. So,
Todd, just wanted to say thank you. I have 5 kids here, 2 high schoolers, a middle schooler, and 2 pre-K, so I'm doing my part to try to get those numbers up. But I had a couple of questions for Rob, and I was going to ask them and they had to leave. So maybe you could help us when we go to coffee hours or interact with the elected representatives. I'm trying to understand the funding model because it seems to me like the funding model keeps getting blamed. I'm not saying you're blaming it, but in these discussions, but is he saying that Act 60 means that if Burlington votes in a larger budget and you guys are being responsible with your budget that we're paying for it?
100%, that's exactly how it works.
There's no way to change that?
No.
That's Act 60?
That is Act 60 in a nutshell. It's more complicated than that, but that is Act 60 in a nutshell. So you may only see a 2.48% increase here in this budget, but some other school district could be proposing a 15% increase in their budget. And at the end of the day, all school budgets go into the Vermont Education Fund, and the tax rate's set on that. And that's how you get your tax yield. What the biggest driver for tax rate here in Arlington is a low CLA, okay? That is a humongous driver. If we stay with this particular system, that piece has to be fixed. And the only way to fix that's a townwide reappraisal, which every town in Vermont needs a townwide reappraisal. So I think we're looking at 27 or 28 before that even happens. And then you're probably looking at a year after that before that comes into effect.
Okay, that's confusing to me, but I understand it.
Yeah.
Apparently it's something we can't change right now. I mean,
18 years on this board, and it took me 17 and a half to figure it out. No.
Yeah. And then my other question is, I read an article when Act 73 was passed that Arlington would have to apply for an exception. So it seemed like there was a strong possibility we could get that exception. Has there been anything said about that, or are we just waiting? I mean, maybe they haven't told us anything that we can do to apply for that. Is that just kind of conjecture right now?
Yeah, I think those were conversations when they thought the task force was going to come up with maps.
Okay.
But the task force did not come up with maps. So I wouldn't say they're all the way at the back. One of the key pieces of Act 73 was the maps. Okay, that's a requirement within the act. So it didn't happen. So they're kind of back at the drawing board, trying to save Act 73 with their own maps. But like your representative said, they're not in agreement on how those are going to be formed.
Okay.
And again, because a lot of people haven't, there's been no data that has shown that it's a significant cost savings. Now, we can anecdotally talk about that. We could take, our 200 plus high school kids and send them to Mount Anthony and close our school building. Would that save money? Yep, probably would. Because Mount Anthony could take all of our kids today probably without hiring more than a handful of teachers. The question becomes, is that what's best educationally for students? That's the balancing piece between in all this.
I'll just
discussion.
answer it no. But I do have one last question. So part of what I'm trying to understand, I know you're not the legislature or representatives we need to talk to, but with the whole issue of tuitioning from other towns like BBA, I'll just say it, part of what I don't understand is we are a public school, so I don't understand, the way I see it, we are a school that they could be sent to. So I guess I don't understand maybe you can answer this, but if the state can't decide on that, it seems like Arlington could stay open. And that's part of what I'm trying to understand.
There is, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Arlington's going to close. That is not what I'm going to tell you. What I am going to tell you is small schools are under attack, period. Period. And if you look at education solely as a dollars and cents thing, like I told you, it would be more cost effective to send our 200 plus students to a different school that could take them based on their size. However, like I have argued forever, that is not, in my opinion, this isn't the board's opinion, because I only speak for myself. I think they probably agree with me. That would not be in the best educational interest of our students. Okay? So the maps and the structure of those are going to be very important. And I'll just, for example, let's say we became one supervisory union with BRSU and SVSU. If we were if everybody was school choice in that area, that may have an effect on how many kids go out of Arlington and how many kids come into Arlington. It may balance out, we may get more. So finite details are going to be important in all of that. And Nicole and I have met with our state reps and one of our state senators and had conversations, but they don't have any answers. There is no answers coming out of Montpelier right now, zero. They're still up in the air about all of this. We simply ask, give us a foundation formula, something that we can work within monetarily and keep our tax rate stable, but our education's intact. We haven't even seen that. So, Wendy.
I think what Joe is trying to say, and not that we want to hurt Arlington in any way, but that when people at many towns vote against their the higher rates and their budgets, it sends a message to Montpelier that we're not happy with what's going on, especially when what you say, and I don't know, I wasn't here last year, but the year before, you gave pretty much the same whatever on the budget, is that there was so much that you can't touch. And that's why I say repeal Act 60. I got to look this up. I want to see what the Supreme Court, who brought it before it, who was behind it, if it did go. You better show me person, because I've been saying this for years that, just repeal Act 60 and let's get back on track, and we'll figure out a different way to help the towns that need help. But in this case, towns that are always receiving towns, I'm sure, got very comfortable with receiving and didn't do anything to keep their budgets intact, so that now we're paying more and more and more. And this is not a workable thing. So and the only thing I could see is let's go back. I just can't understand how the Supreme Court could say that towns, which has always been the way it was, don't have, can't speak for their jurisdiction and their taxpayers.
I can try to help explain that in case people are curious about that. So back when Act 60 came into play, basically what happened was the Supreme Court said that education opportunity has to be equal across the board, which is why we're in the system that we're in. So Arlington may choose, you all as taxpayers may choose, hey, we're going to give Arlington School District $15 million to educate their kids. But Mount Anthony is only going to give their school $10 million. And so there's going to be less opportunity for the kids in Mount Anthony than in Arlington. So the U.S. Supreme Court said it must be equal across the board, which is how Act 60 came into play many years. That is a very simplified version of how Act 60 is. Right, Marianne? Yes. So, yes.
Father Jeremy here. I'm an Episcopalian, which means we have an hour mass, so I know that people want to get out of here. I get that, so it's a quick question. Sunderland is a blended district, I understand. They get school choice as far as I understand. So can you just kind of very, very, very briefly, so that we can kind of go on, talk about how that impacts the budget in terms of like the attraction of the kids to bolster our budget, or how you manage those kids budgetarily, not kind of knowing how many we're gonna get?
It's an estimate. So for Sunderland students, their school choice after grade 8, so 9, 10, 11, 12, their school choice. We do receive Sunderland kids here. They would be in our budget as a revenue because we charge Sunderland a tuition for their kids to come here. So they're in our revenue line. It is same with Sandgate. We have lots of kids that come from Sandgate. We charge Sandgate a tuition. That's in our revenues, okay? That is very fluid. And the reason I say that is you could have your student going to another school. They don't like it. They choose to come to Arlington. That's a bump in revenue. Sandgate, you could have a family of 6 move in. That's a significant revenue bump. So it's really, it's an estimate based on your prior year averages, but we have seen fluctuations in that, both positive and negative. You know, you have a family of 6 move out of Sandgate and go to a different district, that's a decrease in your revenue. So it's really, in this business, there's no solid way to determine exactly what your revenues are going to be. It's an estimate based on your prior years. And you don't want to overestimate your revenues because then it reduces the amount you need in taxes and affects your budget.
So a couple of points. I'm all about the money. I have no children, and a lot of my friends with no kids say, "Why do I have to pay for schools?" I don't benefit from that. I'm not of that mindset. I know that part of my property value is in the fact that we have a great school system. Without that, what are you going to have? You're going to have parents coming around looking to move into an area, and now all of a sudden they've got to have their kids bused a long way away to a school district that's overcrowded now. So they choose to live somewhere else, and then all you end up getting are a bunch of vacationers, second homes, third homes. You lose your community. You lose your identity as a town. However, I also understand that we want to send a message that, we think that the taxes are too high for many reasons, and schools being, there has to be a way. I don't know what it is. I'm not a financial wizard. But I also disagree that voting this budget down, yeah, sure, it sends a message. Is it even going to be listened to? No, in my opinion. What's going to happen is maybe we're the only one that says no, and then we've got to deal with the consequences of that. Either have to have another vote or have some dire consequences. So, I look at this as if you really want to make a statement and you really want to make a change, a token, gesture is not really going to make a difference. Nobody's going to pay attention to it, even if, our politicians tend not to listen unless it's in the voting booth. So that's my opinion. I think, as you've said, there's not a whole lot we can do. There's no real leverage that we have. This has to come from the state, and that means that there has to be a change at the state level. And that's just, if we want change, that's what we have to do, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I would encourage you not to stand idly by. I would encourage you to reach out to your state representatives and senators and voice your opinion. Emails, go to their coffee hours, voice your opinion. When we met with them the last time, that's exactly what they told us, was tell people to email. Not just your state reps and your state senators, email all of them. Okay, they need to hear the voices of Vermonters, that they support their schools, but taxes have to be held in check. And that requires a change in the system, one way or the other.
I'd like to thank you for sharing the information tonight, because there isn't enough, especially about Act 73 and what it intended. And it didn't just paint a target on the back of small schools that weren't by necessity. It painted a target on the back of small districts, the governance model, really big changes. And I'm going to disagree about voting just for money. I think student outcomes are very important. I deal with a lot of schools in different states, and I don't think the student outcomes around this area are necessarily great. They could be a lot better. But I think you also have to think about the enrollment numbers and how you can sustain buildings that weren't made for the enrollment numbers, and think about the future. And so I'm going to ask the board to kind of move past right now, and we have a legislative session coming on, and think about what does it look like for the kids down the road? Because if you really took a survey, I don't think everyone wants to go to Bennington. I think they want to go north, or at least have more choice themselves. So I think it's going to take some study and time to think about that, and we might get some curveballs out of Montpelier.
So one of our intentions to do after we got through town meeting and budgeting was to have conversations and meet with our business manager and superintendent about doing some mathematics, about what it would cost to send our kids south, what it'll cost to send our kids north. We know what it's costing us to keep our kids here. And we've had one request from a community member to create a task force to help study that. And that is going to be on our agenda after we do our reorganization in March, for the board to have that conversation about what direction we move in that, so that we can present you all with the information, okay? So that you can make an educated decision on what you feel is best for your taxes and your education. And we're going to look at, to me, we have to look at both. What it's going to cost and what are your educational outcomes. And you brought up property values. That is a huge piece. I've brought that up several times in our conversations with our state reps and the senator, is that certain actions could significantly reduce your property values. And that has to be something that is considered throughout all this. It would be so one of the things that, no matter what happens, it would be highly, highly, highly unlikely that you would see anything happen to Fisher School. Okay, where you would see the change would be here. All right, to bus your kindergartners to some school elsewhere, it just wouldn't make sense, educationally or financially, to be honest with you. So we can, but I don't think you're going to see any real different change in that. I think you'd probably see that it's most cost effective and educationally sound to keep the age bracket here. I think our primary focus would be, what do we do from grade 7 and up? And is there anything?
Yep, right here. Jamie Postian. As it sounds, it appears that I am the only true cut, my position going away, as 3 of the others have moved into other positions. As you all know, I've been here 13 and a half years. I've managed the construction projects here and everything else, maintained the grounds, the buildings, alarm systems, everything. I'm just wondering, without me being here, and I don't see it in the budget, what is your plan to take over the position that I've been doing? Because I know the custodians can't handle it. They've got enough to do with what they're doing now. It takes me 15 hours at least to mow the lawns, another 10 hours to weed eat. Other than this year, I have been plowing every year. I had 108 hours of bonus time last year because I'm salaried. That was nothing extra in my pay. I lost a weekend, 1 day a weekend every weekend last year. It doesn't make sense to me for the position that I have. For as much as I do here, I spend an average of 11 to 15 hours a day here, starting at 5:30 in the morning. A lot of times if I'm running sports runs and stuff, I don't get back until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So I'm just wondering what the plan is going forward, because I haven't heard it. And this is the first time I've heard that the other positions have been moved to other positions.
Well, they haven't necessarily been moved. They have the opportunity to put in for those vacant positions. So positions were cut. If you want to talk about people, positions, that, those are, people mean something to us. However, when you look at budgets, you have to look at positions, not people. We unfortunately have to take your workload and disperse it amongst a lot of people. Custodians, assistant principals, all those areas. Not one of us wanted to make a single cut here. But without making those cuts, we would have been at a 40 to 45% increase, estimated increase in taxes. So it stinks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Love to keep every employee we have. Absolutely would love to do that. It's a balancing act every year. This year was, I will tell you that this year was by far the most difficult budgeting year I've experienced in 18 years. No question about it. Because the people in our schools are our friends, they're our families, they're our community members, all of that. And we have to balance that all the time. Not easy. But to answer your question, your workload is just being dispersed amongst many people. You're right, you do a lot. Okay? I believe that you're keeping the bus driving aspect. I believe that's been worked out. So we have to replace your maintenance piece. And that's being dispersed amongst a lot of people. We have to do more with less. It's just something we have to do without affecting education the best that we can.
Jessica Massey again. More of a comment rather than a question per se, but when we're looking at budgets of small schools and kind of the threat that some might be closed, I think, and rising costs of employing people and providing benefits, the healthcare costs, I think, is obviously a massive portion of the compensation that we all receive. I'm also a state employee. I get the same coverage. And that said, Blue Cross Blue Shield just had an article come out. They issued a statement about the charges that UVM makes when they order a CAT scan, or what they charge insurance. And that is much higher than anywhere else in the state. And they're just allowed to do that. We can fix that when we vote for hospital budgets. Like, those are big things. Like, UVM billing like that is pretty insane. But the more that UVM buys up all the little hospitals around and extends their network, the more those things are going to be subjected to their prices. So it's going to be less, they're kind of taking the corner on the market, right? So I think when we think about budget, and the healthcare also affects the schools in a huge way. So when they're having discussions about our hospital budgets, and some of the small hospitals in the state, several of them, we saw a bunch of FQHCs across the state go away that are in really poor positions, unfortunately with like a half a day's worth of payroll in their bank, which is bad, right? To not address the healthcare piece and expect the school board to solve it, I think is way beyond and too big of an ask as a voter. So just consider ways we can modify the healthcare spending, perhaps.
John Murray, I just want to make a motion to vote on this. If anybody could second.
No vote. We don't vote on it, but.
Oh, okay.
It's an informational section, so there's no vote to actualize, but I was also thinking that it may be time to move on. Is there anything more you'd like to add, Todd?
No, other than just thank you. You know, I put it in my letter and I obviously put it here, but just thank you. Like, honestly, genuinely, thank you. The most amazing part about this community is you've always supported your schools one way or the other. Always supported your schools. You know, it would break my heart to see the school go anywhere or change, and I'll promise you, as I get another year on my term, I will fight for that whole year to the best I can. And I believe that everybody out here and any future board members will do the same. But I really just want to say thank you. One more year on my term. I am not running again. I'm retiring from everything. So, but seriously, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much.
So the last warrant order of business is to transact any further business found necessary and proper when met. So the threshold question is there any further necessary business that we'd like to transact? If not, then that's in the town, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Yes, we've got.
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to publicly thank Willie Knight, who just stepped out. The park we have in town is amazing, and it's all due to all of his work. So I don't know if we were about to adjourn, but I wanted to say that before we all left.
Yes. So if there's no further business, then I would entertain a motion to recess this meeting until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Tuesday, March 3rd, for balloting here at the Arlington Memorial High School Gymnasium. Second. Any discussion? If not, everybody in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? We stand in recess. Again, if you'd like to address the assembly, please come forward and state your name for the record to the microphone in the center of the room. And to introduce our select board, we have, again, kind of going from left, right to left, Dan Harvey, Matt Bykowski, Glenn Sherman, Jamie Poston, Karen Krulkowski, excuse me. And as we begin, with the warned order of business, I've been asked by the Select Board to present a special resolution, which I'll read for the Assembly now. Whereas Earl C. Labatt Sr., a resident of Arlington, died on October 28, 2025, after serving his community for many years, and whereas Earl was also dedicated to serving the town as an Arlington lister for 25 years, now therefore be it resolved that the community of Arlington take public note of its loss in the passing of this valuable and esteemed citizen, and be it further resolved that this expression of sympathy be extended to the family of Earl Labatt Sr., and that this resolution be made a permanent part of the record of this meeting on this date of March 2nd, 2026. All those in favor of adopting this resolution, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So moving on to the warned order of business, it's located on page 5 of the printed report. There are kind of two corrections as the warning was presented in the report that I'd like to make. The first is in the second paragraph, which says that voting tomorrow will be on Articles 7 through 37. The actual articles are numbered 7 through 33. The second correction to the warning as printed is in Article 13th. Article 12 is repeated in Article 13th, and the correct Article 13th would be to authorize the sum of $1,500 into the Capital Reserve Fund for the maintenance of town-owned computers. Now, the warning was posted correctly, and the ballots tomorrow are correct. This was just a typo and errors in the written report. So a couple of housekeeping motions to get out of the way. I begin by entertaining a motion to dispense with the reading of the 2025 Annual Town Meeting minutes and ballot results, which are reprinted on page 75 of the annual report. Is there such a motion? Any discussion? There's no discussion on the motion to waive the reading of the minutes and ballot results of the 2025 annual town meeting. Please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Next, I will entertain a motion to dispense with the reading of the annual town warning for the 2026 town meeting. Again, this is reprinted on page 5 with the corrections as noted. Is there a motion to dispense with the reading? Yes. A second? Any discussion on the motion as presented? If not, then all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to Article 1, to hear the reports of the town officers. These reports are set forth on pages 11 through 15 and 34 through 71 of the town report. Is there a motion to accept the written reports of the officers as presented in the published town report? Second? Any discussion? Are there any questions? Yes.
The treasurer's report on page 11, there seems to be $20,461.08 that are missing. So I'm wondering where that $20,000 is or isn't.
On page 15? Is there, or page 11?
Page 11.
I'm sorry.
The $1.1 million is the Highway Department, Fire Department, Cemetery, and Parks and Recreation. The general fund was omitted, but you add that and add the education fund, and it comes up $20,000 short of the $6.7 million.
Mr. Jervis's inquiry to our treasurer, Kristen Dickinson, today, and I'm not sure she understood his question, and we did not have time to go through it today and get it sorted out. I do know she does both books for the school and for the town, so I do not have an answer to that question, and as you know, I was actually busy correcting other mistakes, so I didn't have a chance to correct this one. It may be something was omitted, it may be something was miscalculated, but I don't have the answer to that. So I would like to have a chance to pursue it with the treasurer and get back to you.
Any other further discussion on the written reports of the town officers? No further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the written reports as presented in the annual report, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Article 1 carries. The next order of business is Article 2, to see if the town will vote a budget to meet the expenses and liabilities of the town. And as Cynthia was just mentioning, there were some errors in the budget as presented in the annual report. There's a correction sheet that identifies those. For our purposes tonight, in terms of what is being voted from the floor, there is, well, on page 30, a summary of the budget, and there's a corrected page 30 that shows the updated numbers. And we have in the appropriation articles being voted on tomorrow, the total of those articles is $359,047, which leaves a floor budget to be voted on tonight in the amount of $1,486,743. Those appropriations that are going to be voted on tomorrow are in the, set forth on pages 21 and 22, or through 22, in the capital reserve funds for the town building and for the computers. On page 25, under voted capital reserve fund transfers, and on page 26, under the line item capital reserve fund for the fire truck. Again, these items total $359,047. Yes.
Could I just say a few words about it?
Let's have a motion and a discussion. Yeah, so is there a motion to accept the select board's budget as presented and corrected by the correction sheets? And is there a second? And now the motion is open for discussion.
Thank you. I have to tell you that I'm doing something that I really hoped I would never have to do, which is making these corrections to the town meeting report, and I still don't understand how these errors crept in. I had many different working versions of it. I added it up over and over and over again. But Joe Jervis found some mistakes, and they're mistakes in the summations in some of the categories. So I didn't have the wrong line items. We have the correct line items that the board
authorized, but somehow errors in the totals crept in. So what you want is you want to get the corrected sheet 30, which is over there, and then you can also get a sheet that shows you exactly the errors that I made. And the problem is if you make an error in the total of one department, like the park department or the town hall department, it carries through all the totals. Most of the errors were small. One of them was like 10,000, but then another one was 5,000 in the other way. So the net effect is that the budget went down by about 10,000. So at least we ended up with a change in a good direction. So what the board did this afternoon is create a whole new page 30, a whole new summary sheet. So, and if people want me to go and get those, we can pass them out and everything. But the numbers that John has just given you are the numbers that we're voting on tonight. And they've all been corrected. God willing, they're correct now, and we'll make sure that this doesn't happen again. So I just wanted for you to understand what happened and why it happened, and that it isn't a question of missing money or anything. It's a question of really transposition errors of some kind that I made, and I take full responsibility for it. Thank you.
So are there any questions or discussions on the budget? Yes, Jim.
We just left a long school board meeting talking about the sustainability of a 19.3% property tax increase. And now we're looking at a 5% town increase. I didn't get a 5% Social Security raise this year. But there's a piece of information that's missing that I think is pretty critical, and it goes to Article 3, which is the surplus. And if my calculations are correct, we had a stellar year in collecting delinquent taxes with over $300,000 showing up in the budget. The general operation of the town had a surplus of around $200,000, and the highway department had a surplus of around $30,000. Parks, we overspent $1,500, but net, there's about $580,000, if my calculations are correct, which should be coming back through Article 3, which would put the net property tax at under $1 million for the town. Are my numbers right?
So I don't have those numbers in my head, but where that comes in is when the board sets the tax rate in July. Right now, we're setting the budget. We're not setting the tax rate. And the actual tax rate that we set will depend on the cash on hand at that time. So if the figures that you describe, in fact, are there, the tax rate will need to be lower. But at this point, we set the budget, we estimate what we will need. We don't take the cash on hand into account at this time. And that was, because I had the same question, and that was what I was informed, that that's how we do it. We take the cash on hand and any surplus into account. So if we are fortunate enough to have that surplus in July, your tax rate will go up less than 5%. Which is what we're sort of saying now. So you are absolutely correct. There is cash on hand. We're not taking it into account. We're going to follow Article 3 and take it into account when we set the tax rate in July. Is that?
You're good.
Yes.
My name is Michael Briggs. I have some line item questions. I'm sort of drawn to the areas where there are big differences between one fiscal year and the next. So starting right on page 17, State of Vermont general revenue, 25 was $2,500. You're anticipating 25,000 for the next fiscal year, and I'm wondering how that's possible.
We have a presentation. We'll answer your question.
Okay.
We have a presentation that may answer your question.
Okay.
In the process. So let us do the presentation first, then we'll take questions on any given item, line item, or whatever. Okay. But the presentation should give you a better picture, and then we can have a more intelligent discussion.
Fair enough.
I was instructed, because I looked at the same thing that you did, and I was instructed that what we get from the state of Vermont varies a tremendous amount depending on their programs, depending on the timing of payments and all kinds of things. So they recommended that I put in the same expected revenues as we had this year. So that's why the expected revenue, because things change so much for every year. The fact that we planned for like 25,000 in that first line and we got 2,500 doesn't mean we won't get 25,000 this year. It all depends on a lot of things that are happening in Montpelier. So that was what I was told to build the budget on, and that's what I did. I agree with you, that seems kind of odd, but remember, these are not things we necessarily control, because it may have to do with the timing of when we file for reimbursement for some highway project or something like that. But I agree with you. I find it unsatisfactory and odd, but those numbers are not under our control, so they said just put in the same numbers. I think it could be revisited, but that's what I was told. So, sometimes I do what I'm told.
We'll come back to that.
Is there a budget presentation? Would you like to? Yeah, this would be the time, I think.
I will be taking questions from anyone, and Matt's going to do the presentation.
Good evening. We'll whip through this pretty quick. I, like Todd, like to walk around a little bit. So just real quick, again, Earl, lifelong resident, passed away, so we just wanted to memorialize him here in the presentation as well. And also Joe, he's retired as Town of Arlington Lister after 26 years, so we really appreciate all of his service and dedication to the town. Got a couple quick shout outs this evening for our town employees. We really wanted to recognize and sincerely thank them for their outstanding dedication and service to the town of Arlington. First off to Susan, her first successful year as town clerk in her commitment to professionalism and service to our residents. We can't forget Robin. Robin is our assistant clerk this year, and her support and leadership in helping successfully onboard Susan and maintain our smooth office operations. And Karen on the board. Karen did an outstanding job of publishing our town report and ensuring our community stayed informed and connected, even through all of our slight computational and printing errors, but Karen and I worked on it this afternoon as well, so she's been with us right through the very end. We've got Willie Knight, and it was mentioned earlier, but really his dedication to the rec park and successful improvements to the golf course this past year, and it really benefits our residents and visitors alike. Quick shout out to our highway crew, continued really hard work in keeping our roads, infrastructure, and public ways maintained and safe throughout the year. And it's been a tough winter, so they've really done a great job for us. And finally, Cynthia. Cynthia stepped in as our interim town administrator, and she's helped provide some steady leadership and support during this transitional period. A couple 2026 initiative highlights for you that we are working on as a board. A recruitment of a new town administrator, so we'll be going out to a recruiting firm to really pull somebody in that's highly qualified that can help lead the town in the future, mid-2026 and beyond. We're going to make some employee handbook and policy updates, HR kind of stuff, always required and much overdue, so we're going to work on that, as well as our town website redesign. So town website's a little bit aging. We want to make it much more accessible, easy to find information for you, ADA compliant, all of that good stuff. So that's an initiative that we have. And also maybe a question that I already heard at least once as to why was the website line item incrementally more expensive this year, and that is one reason, because we have one-time costs for provisioning a new website for the town. Some continued park improvements. We're going to be seeking grant funding opportunities, and as well as our continued work on our wastewater and firehouse projects through our committees that work on that. And if you're interested in more information on either one of those topics, we really urge you to join in on a committee meeting, come to Town Hall when we meet, or join remotely. Some driving factors for our budget in 2026. The first is our Route 7A sidewalk project. That's actually going to happen, we hope, this year. And we have safety for mostly students and residents alike coming from the downtown corridor out to the rec park. That sidewalk will continue past the Arlington Inn. It'll cross across 7A, down past Chem Clean, and then down into the rec park. And it's going to really make a much safer path for high school students, elementary students, kids, all the residents in the downtown core to get out to the rec park. That's going to be a one-year impact only, and it's $109,000, which is our share of the split on that project. The firehouse ownership transfer. So this past year, we did finally complete late in the early winter, transferring the firehouses from the Arlington Fire Protection Association, which previously owned both east and west. And so now those are owned by the town of Arlington. They are a town of Arlington asset, and we look forward to making improvements to them. And it will also help us in the future as we look to a potential new firehouse, because these assets are now within the fold of the town of Arlington. Employee compensation, obviously wage and salary increases were included in the budget. We had a treasurer line that was corrected, school paid portion removed. There used to be a school paid portion for the treasurer that was removed from our budget, moved to the school budget. And then we did add an overtime allowance to more accurately compute what our actual payroll line item looks like. And finally, health insurance changes. We did go out with a consultant this year. We selected a lower cost plan that provides very similar coverage to what our associates had previously. We increased our employee cost sharing, so employees now pay 10% of their health care cost instead of the town paying 100%. So we're trying to move more in line with industry standard there. And some employees chose to take a stipend option that we offer in lieu of health care insurance from the town. The overall result was lowered town cost for our health care, and that's depicted in the budget. So our 2026 total proposed spending is $2,147,833. I've worked on, these numbers have been very confusing today. 883, thank you. In comparison, our 2025 budget was $2,053,184. And so that represents approximately a 5% increase this year. We'll outline these a little bit better for you. If we look at our 26 budgets for general admin, highway, fire, cemetery, and park, that's where we come with the total. We can see what our budget was in 2025 was $2,053,184. Our actual was $1,904,888. And this is what we're estimating this year for spending of $2,147,883. The next slide will show you a little bit better visually of how much of the budget goes to each particular department. So by far, highway takes the most of our budget at 44%. Administration, 34%. The fire department is 15%, and that increase is directly related to us taking over the firehouses. Then park and recreation, 6%, and finally our cemeteries account for 2%. This is a better visualization of where we are up over the previous year in the budget. Administration, 3.3%, highway, 2.4%, Again, the fire department and the firehouses contributed to that 17.6% increase. Cemetery, 10.4%, largely related directly to the cost of contractors to maintain the cemetery for us, mow the lawn, tree work, trimming, those types of things that have to happen at the cemetery to keep those in tip-top shape. And then finally, 7.3% for our park. Let's see, our total proposed spending, again, $2,147,883. We're going to remove our non-property tax revenue of $302,093. Property taxes to be raised will be $1,845,790. Less our articles on the Australian ballot that you will see tomorrow. They total $359,047. So our floor budget vote this evening is going to be $1,486,743. A little bit more on those Australian ballot appropriations that you may be wondering about. Capital Reserve Fund allocations account for $243,500. Petitioned appropriations to non-town organizations. So that's money going to other organizations outside the town that you approve, may or may not, on the Australian ballot. That's $115,547. And that brings us to that $359,047 total. With that, I'm going to bring it back for questions, and you can come up to ask at the podium, at the microphone here. We can run the microphone out to you, and Dan is going to answer questions for you. Yeah.
John Murray, my question is about on page 10, the salaries. Have those wages increased by at least the federal cost of living adjustment from last year? If they haven't increased, why not?
I can answer that in a couple of ways. The elected officers, those the select board members and so forth, those are just arbitrary numbers we picked. They have nothing to do with cost of living, but they haven't gone up in quite a number of years, and I told the board that we need to do it incrementally and not all at once. So we bumped them a little bit. Previously, in the 2008 budget, 8-9, we had, as a token, taken a 10% decrease. We didn't correct that back to what it was for a decade. So you got a bargain in that respect. But I just told them that you can't go 15 years and then bump it. Just incrementally get it back. So we did that over a couple of years now. Say that again?
The question was about the full-time employees?
Yes, the full-time employees actually got more than a cost of living adjustment, but some may argue that it didn't go up in cost of living because they now have to participate in their insurance premiums. For years, we did 100% Cadillac plan. During our last 2 years, the healthcare, as you saw in the school budget, we have not escaped that at all. We've had double-digit increases for the last 2 years, and it became unsustainable for the town to do that. So we decided to start in a phased way, phasing in. Our target is 80-20. We're going to phase that in over at least a couple of years, maybe 3. But we're doing that to try to ease the burden on the employees. At the same time, the plan itself also has some features. For example, the deductible, they're sharing 10% in the premium, but they're only paying 90% or 10% of the deductible. we're covering 90% of the deductible. So, but it also stabilizes and makes predictable our health insurance premiums, which were out of control. So just as a percentage, so I'm not sure exactly what the cost of living was this year, but I know the mainline employees, the town guys, they all got, everybody got a minimum of 5. Some, based on merit, got a little bit more, but that's how we figured it. So net, it may not look like that, but it definitely, they got probably double our historic raises. I hope that answered your question. Yes, sir.
Michael Briggs, more line item questions. Okay. On page 17, in 25, you saw almost $60,000 in interest. And for 26, you're only budgeting $20,000 in interest. Why is that?
Are you in revenues or spending?
Page 17, general revenue.
Okay. Yep. So part of that was interest on our ARPA funds that have now been spent.
Okay.
I think the bulk of that is what that is.
All right.
And that was spent in last year's budget by statute.
Okay.
The way the rules were written for those American Rescue Plan funds,
Mm-hmm.
they had to be, they were given earlier, but they had to be spent by a date certain, and it was in 25.
Yep.
That's where that interest came, because it sat in our accounts for a while and gained a lot of interest.
Okay, fair enough. On page 20, legal fees, line blah, 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 333. It's almost a 60% increase. Are you anticipating legal trouble?
You know,
No.
and I can take that. It's a changing landscape, right? And we do rely on legal counsel a lot more than perhaps the town has relied on it in previous years. But we're also taking a position to limit our liability and make sure that when we either write language or we have a dispute or an issue, let's say property, right-of-way, anything like that, we are consulting with counsel to make sure that we limit the liability for the town. It's a small price to pay up front to save you a lot of money on the back end.
Fair enough. On page 22, I see under payroll and benefits for highway, your workers' comp's going up. I guess that's no big surprise, but it's going up a whole lot more than your payroll. Is that just due to insurance costs rising?
It is due to insurance costs, and in some ways we have really no control over it other than the safety we maintain that we maintain in our own buildings and vehicles. But it's a statewide pool, if you will. We pay, in many ways, in workman's comp, we pay for the mistakes of others, even though we're careful.
Okay.
But any accident can happen to any guy at any time. So,
Sure.
you know,
Okay.
that's kind of a crapshoot, but it is insurance.
Okay. On page 26, Fire Department revenues, Matt has well explained why the town is taking over the buildings, but if that's the case, why, are these the town's expenses for fire department, building maintenance and electricity? And God almighty, why did the electricity go from $500 a year to $18,000?
Those are those very efficient heat pumps.
Okay.
They work well in this climate.
We're actually burning oil right now.
Okay. All right. And I guess, well, I see you're on page 28, you're anticipating your electric costs for the park buildings are going to go down. That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, for the electricity in the park, we turned the water off a little earlier this year, and we were able to, we use electric strip heaters in the restrooms to keep the pipes from freezing. So by turning the water off a little earlier this year, we were able to reduce those strip heaters, which has, again, a direct relation, you know, to the power budget. It's just, yeah. They're not quite as efficient as the heat pumps.
And we blow all the
almost
water
equal.
lines out, so.
I see on page 34, we're going to potentially repave in front of Dan's house. I'm looking forward to that. But I didn't see anything in the highway budget. I know Warmbrook was like a $330,000 expense for that paving. So where's that money coming from to potentially pave East Arlington Road?
So that's a half mile of road, it's $50,000. That's what we budgeted this year for blacktop. Plus, we are also putting in for the highway paving grant, which will also help with that.
Okay, so all of the blacktop money and potentially a grant?
Yeah, well, yeah. So whatever we put in there this year, the 50,000 that we are putting in the budget, plus the highway paving grant. And there's a big project and a small project, finishing up Warmbrook, the northern end, as well as paving a half mile of East Arlington Road.
Also, Joe, one of the things that we did as an initiative this year was Mark and the liaisons, the highway liaison, myself and Glenn, we worked on, in our budget process, we did it a little differently the last few years. We went back to kind of a line-by-line analysis. And one of the things that Mark wanted to do, and we concurred, was to have a schedule over an 8-year cycle of repaving everything in town. So consider that the first 8th, the big deposit on that 8-year cycle. So we're going to go around and start with the worst, and by the time we get to the end, it's probably going to be as bad as the worst was. So, but that's just the nature of pavement. Yes, go ahead.
Here.
Page.
Sorry, thank you. Page 26, back on the electricity, says 2025 was 1,000, and the actual was $465, and then we are on 18,000. And he said, so does it mean that you're paying for these heat pumps this year?
So, well, there's a couple different things there. One is that the electric bill used to be paid for by the fire protection company. And you would not have seen that in the budget because they are a nonprofit separate from the town. And since we own the buildings now, we pay all of the electricity.
Essentially, we've taken over their expenses of those buildings, and that's where that increase came.
So we take over, I think we paid fuel oil before, right? We
did.
paid the
We paid
oil,
the oil.
but they paid electricity, they paid for a telephone line there for the alarm. There was a few, building maintenance, stuff like that. Now, we've assumed, because we own those buildings, we assume the cost of the maintenance and the electricity. And that large jump, though, definitely we saw in the fire protection, saw a large jump in the power when they added the heat pumps upstairs in that building. So we're working to better manage that. Hopefully we will come in under budget. That's all we can ask for.
Matt, so the $18,000 for electricity would include what your plan is for the future electric bills?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that's the estimated based off of, we took, I think, a number of invoices that the protection presented to
Paid,
us. And then we're able to average that out and come up with an estimate of what we feel both of the buildings
For both
will
buildings, okay.
cost us.
And on page 25, there's $10,000 for communication and Wi-Fi. And then on page 26, there is cloud IT services for 6,800. Is that, what are the two different things?
Your communication and Wi-Fi services are like your fiber internet
Comcast.
access,
Yep.
The physical layer access to the buildings, so you can get out to the cloud. And then those cloud IT services in the instance of the fire department, that would be our cloud-based RMS or run management system. So there are a number of cloud-based service software as a service solutions that we use now within the fire department for run management.
Gotcha. Okay.
They've got tablets in the trucks. It's a connected world these days. So those are the software as a service subscriptions that we pay for.
Yep. And the building maintenance, I mean, the repair of the door, it was a very costly year last year for the fire protection. Just the repair of some of the doors was almost like
Yeah.
10 grand. So that's
The
seems
other
like a high
thing,
number, but I don't know if it's going to be that accurate.
yeah, the other thing that's important to note about that, those particular services is years ago, we did bill insurance companies for calls, mostly accidents, but they could be car fires too. But that fell apart because the insurance companies kind of played a hard line and said, well, you're not doing this in any kind of an organized way. These services now do that. So some of these costs, if not a whole bunch of these costs on those particular items, are going to be offset by collecting from the insurance companies. And that's covered under revenues, but it's kind of hard to track those two things together.
And because this is the first year that we have the two fire halls under the auspice of the town entirely, this is a best guess estimate based on historical figures that we've looked at. We may come in under budget, and the budget is a goal, right? Not to go over, but if we can come in under, that would be our goal. So best guess for some of these numbers, because it is the first year and we don't have a full 12 months under our belt around what the actual costs are going to be. We don't believe that it will go over these costs, and we hope that it would come in under. Next year when we do the budget, it will be much more accurate because we will have a full 12 months worth of data that's reliable, billing to the town and tracked through our systems to be able to build an accurate budget going forward.
One thing you should know about budgeting for the town is we approve a budget of X number of dollars. It's not each line item. It's the totality of the budget. So if we decide we need more in this line and less in this line, we can do that internally, and we have a very transparent system for doing so. We will vote to overrun a line, and we will say where we're taking it from. But the total number is what you're voting on, not any individual line. So I hope that clarifies that a little bit.
Peggy Hansen. Where did the Arlington Fire Protection get their money to run what they were doing before it was turned over to the town?
A lot of public fundraising. Yes, Jamie can much better answer that question.
I'm good.
Got it? Okay.
You're good.
Okay. So I've been a member of the fire department for 36 years. We have done, when I first started, we did bingo every Thursday night. That paid off our mortgages on the firehouses. We then transitioned to some dinners and things like that we've done. We've done chicken barbecues. We do the carnival. We used to have our Thursday night, what the heck was it called? our big fundraiser of the year over at the firehouse. We used to do it over there every year. That's where all of our money came from, as well as donations and stuff bequeathed to us when people passed away. So we had a pretty good budget, and it's just with donations down the last few years, it was just unsustainable for us to stay as a private organization any longer. So that's why we looked to move to the turning over the stations to the town.
And with regards also to the fire department, and Dan alluded to this just a little bit, that, you know, we've engaged with service to recover costs where we can around accidents, search and rescue, anything like that that is a non-residential building fire in Arlington. Consumables are a huge part of fire response, especially for an automobile accident, right? So you've got special materials to absorb fluid leaks and such. We've engaged with a company. They go out, it's integrated with our run management system now. So after the call, the run automatically goes to a billing company. They do all of the work in putting together the claim for the person's insurance that had the accident, or persons, if there are multiple of them. And in that case, then they issue the bill. They take a small percentage, and we get some money back from that. It's free money, basically, that's left on the table, right? That we weren't collecting before. We're going to be using that money, one, to offset our consumables budget for things like Zipsorb and those booms that collect, you know, oil to keep it from going down into our waterways if there's an accident. And then any additional income that we get there, the way the ordinance is written for insurance billing for the fire department, that money will go into the fire truck sinking fund to help offset the cost of the next fire truck that we have to purchase. Fire trucks are becoming considerably more expensive year over year, so we're a little bit behind the 8 ball, if you will, on our fire truck sinking fund currently. So we are hoping that by billing our insurers for things like accidents, we can recover a little bit, help offset that for the taxpayers in the future. If you were to look, if I was to look right now, I would say we have close to $13,000 in billings so far this year for automobile accidents that the fire department has responded to. One recently was an oil truck that overturned, had fluid leaks. So our insurer has already gone back to that company for payment based on our policy and the rates that we just recently updated in that policy, and they're following FEMA rates as well as our rates, adding a 15% billing surcharge to that, and they've billed that company. That company has authorized the payment already, so we're just waiting for the check there. And there were a couple other instances of automobile accidents where we were able to bill and recover some money that will help offset those consumables that they really needed to use in the event of an emergency. So we're hoping that over time we'll see that funding come back in, and that will be added to the fire truck sinking fund to help offset those costs in the future.
I think we had a question.
Yeah. Sorry. Hello, Bruce McDonald, East Arlington Road. And circling back to highway, not with a specific dollar amount in mind, but trucks consistently overshoot HBH and end up going along that strip of East Arlington Road between there and the parking lot turnaround field across from Rogerland. I don't know if it is possible for the town to compel HBH to have better signage on Hale Road, or better yet, to change their actual delivery address, because the problem is that their address is that empty field, which is right next to my house. And on an almost daily basis, I have to go out and yell up into the cab of a truck to explain to them that they have overshot, they need to turn around. It creates a lot of wear and tear on that portion of the roadway. And you will notice if you use that piece of road that it also wipes away the lines in the road on the bridge and just past the actual HBH truck entrance, which has a ridiculously small and plain sign. And people overlook the 8-foot, 3-inch, whatever. I know, Dan, you have seen trucks go all the way up to you and have to reverse.
I see them go, I said, they're coming back.
Yeah, so it seems that there would be some way to mitigate that, which would be better signage or a change of address, and it would eliminate a nuisance for more than a dozen houses.
Better signage would probably help, but how a driver can't see by the antique center, or formerly antique center, a flashing sign that is well ahead of the sign that tells the height and the covered bridge. I mean, did you hear what he said? They can't speak English. And that's, you know, I mean, unfortunately, I think what some of them do, some of the tractor trailer guys, they, instead of using the tractor trailer version that has all of the overhead warnings and everything on it, they cheap out and use their GPS on their phone. And that's what's happening. They're being sent shortest distance, whatever it is. And it isn't just HBH, it's trucks. It's all kinds of different trucks. And they've torn up my yard, turning around. I finally stopped them from turning around when they knocked over my mailbox. So,
because HBH's number is the next number to my house. And it's a cheap shot to say they don't speak English because every single one that I have spoken to does.
Some of them are, I think the biggest part of the problem is they just cheap out on the GPS. They don't use truckers' GPS, which is not cheap, but it's come down in price a lot, but still. And it's invariably, it's a trucker out of Albany that's never been in the area or somewhere. But Sunderland, on the other end of the covered bridge, has exactly the same problem.
Yeah. And
they've done signage and different things up there, and they still have the issue. So, and it's, you know, it's frustrating. I get it, totally get it. But it's, I don't know. I think it's a multifaceted problem. That's something we can definitely take up with them and have them address it on Hale Road. Yeah. I will
We'll have
look
to
into
look
that.
and see
Yeah.
what their official
The
E911
911
address
addressing
is.
goes through the town clerk, so we can fix that.
Any other questions or comments on the budget?
Steve?
Hopefully I have a booming voice. I guess I have to use the mic. Thanks very much, Glenn. Sunday night basketball up here. In keeping with the electricity, I consolidated all the departments that have electricity expense. And electricity expenses is level budget when you take out the fire department at $11,100. However, we are increasing our fees to solar from $6,500 to $10,000. Or is the town saving at least $20,000 in electricity for the solar?
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, use that mic.
Take Steve's, he can use the other one.
He'll use the other one.
So the figure that is in the budget is based on what we've been working from with the tax credit. My understanding of that situation is that if it's basically we are paying for the solar tax, the solar energy, and if we weren't paying for the solar energy, we would be paying more for the electricity. This is a complicated area, and I think the board is not satisfied with it because of that complexity, and we may, the amount of tax credit you're going to get for using solar is about to go down. So the board is going to revisit this and evaluate what's going on here, because we also are sort of like, you know, how is this working? So that's not a satisfactory answer, but that's the best answer that I have for you.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, because if...
We're looking at detailed evidence that we may end up dropping that.
Okay, because if I'm not saving 20 grand, it doesn't make business sense. Another question on where is the interest on the capital reserve funds going? That each of these gain interest every year. Because it's not showing up anywhere, like on page 13, I'll just pick the Park Equipment Fund. The balance at the opening was a little bit under $18,978. We added 25, and at the end of last year was $21,477.89. Where's the interest on the, on that money, on those monies?
So this again is the treasurer's section of the report, so I will need to pursue this with her, but my understanding is that we don't have separate funds. All the money is in one big account. And so I believe that the interest that someone else asked about earlier, when the interest on that first page was 59, where was it? On 50, where's the interest here?
Interest right here.
Yeah, the interest on page 17, the interest was $59,000. That was interest on everything, the ARPA funds and the CRF funds and everything in that line. I don't believe we allocate interest to each particular CRF fund. But again, that's because you're not seeing it. So we're not allocating it that way. It's all going into the fund overall. I can verify that for you from the treasurer because I do not really know the answer to that question. That's just my surmise.
So then the 59,000 is going into the general fund
it
for
goes into the
operating,
whole fund.
for operating expenses.
Right, and if you look at the
general operating expenses.
If you look at the capital reserve fund planning, it grows because we allocate money. That's that long-term plan. It's not growing because of interest. We're not having compound interest in each of those funds. It's not set up like that. It's that you get more money in the truck fund or the paving fund or whatever it is because the voters put money in there, and then the interest goes into the whole fund. That is my understanding, but I can definitely talk to the treasurer about it.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. On page 14, you have ARPA funds number 25, and there's a $308,576. And then at the bottom of the page where it says general fund, it says cash on hand at the end of the year, $302,177 and pennies. Coming back to the ARPA funds up above, if I subtract the $308,000 from the cash on hand, the general fund account is overdrawn by about $6,400. Is this correct?
I don't believe so, but again, you're looking at the treasurer's report, and I can't answer for her work. We have to pursue it with the treasurer.
Okay. Thank you.
The treasurer is a hired employee. I don't know if we probably didn't ask her to be here, did we, Dan?
No, we did not.
That's something that we can do for future meetings, absolutely.
We went from an elected office a couple of years back to a hired office. And as such, we've not used the treasurer at our meetings since. But that question, we'll get back to you on that question because I don't think that's correct, but I think Cynthia's analysis is. So.
One last question, and I'm sorry. Matt, during the presentation, you mentioned the sidewalk project, and I forget you, about 109,000 plus or minus. based upon Kathleen James's presentation or short speech, there's CHIP monies for sidewalks. Can we apply for that to help offset the cost?
We'll definitely look into that. We're gonna, as we look to hire a new town administrator, that's one of our wildly important goals, is to really explore those types of funding opportunities, whether it's the CHIPS money. We see neighboring towns that got considerable amounts of money for a new fire building, firehouse, fire station. It would be one of my goals for a town administrator to really pursue those types of funding, and how do we get on those lists, right, to get some added money. I don't know how you get on the list, but.
The funding for that particular project is all set. We have federal funding, we have state funding, and we have the local cash match. And it's all allocated, it's going forward this year, it's set. There's no way to apply for CHIPS money or anything else in time to get it into this particular project. If we were to do other sidewalk projects then in town, then that might be something we could look at. But this is like a long planned project, it's all set, there's no way to pull anything else into it in time to do the project. Well, actually, most of the funding of that project is federal funds. We only have the 175. The whole project is going to be over 600,000. So in fact, we're all still paying for it because it's all still tax dollars, but only the 175 out of the 660 is property taxes.
I see you've appropriated roughly $60,000 for the town administrator's salary. Is that adequate? It seems light for a real professional.
That is a partial year salary calculation, knowing that we're already into March, right? So we're the end of Q1, where we haven't paid significant, because Cynthia's part-time as town administrator, interiming. So our goal would be to engage with our recruiter and bring in an administrator on or before June 1st. And so that's where we come up with the 60,000 in salary if we figure, probably a little bit more than half a year. It may come in a little bit under, depending where it falls, but we knew that we had Q1 and part of Q2 where we would not be paying an FTE salary on a town administrator. But to your point, next year in the budget, you will see a different number there, because we will hopefully have a full-time employer FTE in that role. And 60,000 is not a realistic number for a 12-month salary on that type of position.
So to just piggyback on that a little bit, probably a more realistic is at least 100 for a professional position. We are in extremely preliminary discussions with adjoining town of Sunderland, with their select board, about, do we need it full-time? Can we get away with 3 days a week? Can we get away with 4 days a week? Can they do one? Whatever, to split that cost between the two towns. And my discussions with them have been, and it's this way with the fire, because they don't have their own fire department. We supply fire. Sandgate doesn't have their own fire department. So we do a lot of mutual aid, but not for free. But if we do the town administrator in kind of that same vein, the way I put it to their board was, it's 3 separate towns, but we're one community in all reality. Our fire chief is the head foreman of the highway department in Sunderland. but he's our fire chief. He lives in Arlington. So, you know, that's what I meant when I said it's 3 towns in 1 community. And legislatively, it's the same way, but they decided to gerrymander all that around. But, so that's very preliminary, and it's in the spirit in which I tried to describe it, that we're trying to cost share some of those things where it makes sense. Yes.
So we're in the
have
process of rewriting the job description for the town administrator. It will largely stay the same as it was. So it's a combination of I'm getting there. It's a combination of human resources. It's a combination of working under the direction of the board, maintaining, seeking grant funding opportunities, right? They supervise. Really, the town administrator becomes the manager for the highway foreman, for some of the other employees in the town, really becomes the manager or the supervisor, right? They report to the town administrator. In turn, the town administrator reports to the board. We give the town administrator direction. It kind of flows down through, right? So just typical hierarchical situation that you would see in any business. That being said, the town administrator also works to go out, find grant funding opportunities, work with BCRC. There is a lot of budget work that the town administrator has to do. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I know we researched it at one point, and I don't remember, Cynthia.
I think there was one year when he brought in 200,000, but I also know that one of the things we're working with was the ARPA money. So we were allocating the ARPA money for a number of years, and rather than going after additional grants. But I know there was one year where the former town administrator Nick Zayas brought in 200,000 in grants. I think that the board is on the right track because working part-time, I have been doing the basics, but that's all I've been doing. And I think there's a lot of need and room for more and for someone who really can do good grant writing and help the board take the town into the future. And I just don't feel that I have the skills or the energy for that. So I think the board is doing the right thing, and I think it'll be worth paying for someone who is really good in all of those dimensions. And then that will allow the board to concentrate on making decisions, and the town administrator can execute them.
And from like the human resources perspective and aspect of that particular job, you know, the board, we and Cynthia spent a considerable amount of time on this, as did the board, in finding a new lower cost health insurance option for our town employees. That is a town administrator function that should be visited annually before open enrollment to see, is there changes that we can make to save money? So there's another area where the town administrator would add value, much like in a larger business, right? There is a human resources department that's constantly seeking that out. Because Cynthia's did a lot on budget and a lot of other work and did enough to keep us together in moving forward. And like, as a board member, I picked up taking care of a lot of the human resources situations and information that we needed to pass along to our employees and take care of. There, like any business with employees, there are a lot of questions that come up that have to be addressed. And that really is best left to an administrator that's a full-time employee that's always there and always available to the associates, right, to answer their questions at the time when they need them, versus the board really doing that where we all have other full-time jobs, right? So we're not always available at the time that an associate or an employee needs us to answer a human resource question or address an issue or a healthcare problem. So that's really another aspect of where the town administrator adds value to both the town as well as our employees, and overall helps limit liability for the town from from an employee perspective as well.
To answer your question a little more directly, though, we do have a description. We are revamping that description based on our experience having a town administrator, which before we didn't, so it's kind of an open-ended question. But we are revamping that so that we will have a description. It'll be public record. Got one here first. Yeah, one back there, and then these two.
So real quick, did you put into the budget the probably $10,000 to $30,000 recruitment fee since you're using a recruiter?
Yes, we
Yes,
have
we do.
factored that in.
Say it's like 9:20, can we move to a vote?
Yep.
Very good.
That's on the slide, right?
You have a,
Just quick on the job description. Are you looking at AI on this? I mean, Cynthia says she's not got enough time part-time. There's a lot of stuff that for white-collar jobs can be so much faster if we're using AI as part of that job.
Absolutely. So that's why we're revamping the job description, engaging with a recruiter that is an expert in recruiting municipal town administrative employees. We'll actually be using a recruiter likely through VLCT, which we are a member, and that will also help us. But to your point, yes, AI is incredibly important, as well as ensuring that they have technical skills, right, to be able to help navigate that world and make sure that they understand some of the core competencies, whether it's 4DK, 4 disciplines of execution, or 5 choices, those types of programs, Agile, to really help move us along and keep the town organized.
Jared, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I see we have services to Sandgate and Sunderland in the fire department revenue, but I see under highway revenue, we don't have any services to other towns, and we seem to spend a lot of time in other towns. Just curious where that comes in.
Well, it's not the same because they have their own highway departments, but we do have, we're making it a little more formal, but it's a kind of a mutual aid system. And they help us, we help them, and, you know, we lose track of it, but it's going to be a little bit more formal contractually, but we're working on that as well. So.
Just a question about the town administrator. I was just interesting, did you find that with the previous town administrator that he had excess time that would require the idea of sharing this between 2 towns? Or was this time pretty much full?
I think there was time available. I'm not saying nobody's 100% efficient with their time, but there's things that we recognized in the process that lent us to that possibility.
we do have a call for a vote on the budget, not necessarily a further discussion on the town administrator. So if we've got any more germane questions about the budget, we'd like to hear them, but if not, I'd like to call the vote. All right, so all those in favor of Article 3, which states to see if the voters will authorize the Article 2, we're getting ahead of myself. To see if the town will vote a budget to meet the expenses and liabilities of the town.
It's on the screen, though.
Yes.
Just
So
the audience.
the amount that's being voted on today is the $1,486,743. So all those in favor of adopting the budget as proposed by the Select Board, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The article carries. The next order of business is Article 3, to see if the voters will authorize the Select Board to apply any surplus funds from the previous fiscal year to reduce taxes in the current fiscal year, unless otherwise approved by a balloted item. Any discussion on the Article 3? An example of it and how it applied last year is on page 15. If there are no further questions or discussion, all those in favor of adopting Article 3, to see if the voters will authorize the Select Board to apply any surplus funds from the previous fiscal year to reduce taxes in the current fiscal year, unless otherwise approved by a balloted item. Please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? 3 carries. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to have all taxes paid to the town treasurer, as provided by law, tax bills to be issued by September 10th, 2026, and payment to be in the hands of the treasurer or postmarked on or before November 10th, 2026. And a second? Any discussion on Article 4? Yes. Meaning, like, any other questions about Article? If not, all those in favor of adopting Article 4 as presented in the warning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The article carries. And next is Article 5. To transact any further business found necessary and proper when met. After any further business, said meeting will recess until Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026 at 10 a.m. for voting here in the Arlington Memorial Gymnasium. Is there any further business? Not. Everybody in favor of moving on from Article 5, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The article carries. And finally, I'll entertain a motion to recess until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning for balloting here.
Thank you
Any
all for
opposed?
coming.
Any in favor? Please signify by saying aye. Thank you for your patience. We'll see you tomorrow morning.